Okay, so today we're going to start up an Airbus A320 in Flight Simulator 2020 from cold and dark on the tarmac. I have an A320 here that is at Edwards Air Force Base. It's just sat on the tarmac. I do all the kind of messing around, testing things out here because not many people visit here that are on multiplayer. So you can quietly just test things on your own. It doesn't tend to be windy out here, even with live weather. So you haven't got that to contend with either. So okay, let's go and look inside the aircraft. So as you can see, it's completely cold and dark. Nothing has been switched on yet or powered up. As we go around the switches, I'll explain what the various switches do. It's worth pointing out that the stock Airbus A320 in Flight Sim 2020, as of the launch version, is massively incomplete. So huge areas of the MCDU, the in-flight computer, are not there. A lot of the switches don't operate. A lot of the systems don't work. They're just presumed to be working in the background automatically. Things like the ADIRS, which is the what's the word? Inertial control system. Inertial guidance system, I should say. Anyway, so the first thing we need to do is get some electric power to the aircraft. So the aircraft has batteries, and it also has the option to use external power. So right in the middle of the overhead panel, you can see batteries. So we can turn batteries on. Notice as soon as we have some power, lots of things light up. So it's a standard kind of methodology with the Airbus that things are dark if they are on. They are lit up if they are off, and they're important to know if they're off. So you can see the battery is showing here the amount of charge left, and that will slowly deplete, so we better get on with it. So if you have external power, you can connect to it and use it. Now we saw outside, if I go to the outside, if I zoom out, there's the external power. So that can be connected up. So I can go back inside the aircraft and I can actually say use the external power. The advantage that will give us is powering things up will be faster. If we have to rely purely on the auxiliary power unit, getting the auxiliary power unit started will take longer because we don't have external power. So first thing we need to look at after we switch on the external power is engine generators. So if we have a look around, they are on. We can see here, we can turn one off, we can turn it back on, and it will show fault. The reason it is showing fault is the engine is not running yet. So that's one for each side. The engine is not running yet, therefore the engine is not generating electricity, because an airliner generates its own electricity from the engines running. So it's burning fuel to make electric, the electric runs the systems. Next thing we do is look for the engine bleed air and make sure it's on. So we can see them down here, and they're on because they're dark, remember. Engine 1 bleed, engine 2 bleed. So this is to vent the hot air leaving the engines, to allow it to leave the system. It's called a bleed. You get the same for the APU, we'll see that in a moment. So the next thing we need to do is switch on the auxiliary power unit. So this is before you have the engines running, in order to get a lot of the other systems running, you need the auxiliary power unit running. So we can go to the master switch and turn it on. And we should be able to then go and start the auxiliary power unit. I'm not sure if we will be able to hear it. You should be able to hear it. Yeah, you can very faintly hear it coming on. And the light will change to available. There it goes. Avail. So that means that the APU now is up and running, so we have to vent the hot air from the APU. Otherwise it will overheat itself, and you can now hear air blowing elsewhere in the aircraft. We can now disengage the external power. Does that make sense? So we've got power coming from internally inside the aircraft now via the auxiliary power units. We can turn that external power off. If we hadn't had external power, it would have taken a lot longer for the APU to get up and running. Fuel pumps to on. So up here you can see all of these fuel pumps are off by default, so we're going to go and turn them on. So these are what, now we have power, we can pump fuel to the engines. And just as a minor thing, we go and look at the lights now and turn the beacon light on. So the light is now flashing outside the aircraft, so people know that we're getting ready basically. Next thing to do is the engines themselves. So we look down into the central console. And you have the thrust levers here. We make sure those are on idle, and they are. You can see the 0 setting there. There's a mode setting and main switches for the two engines. We need to change that mode to start. And then we can switch both of these on. In reality, we wouldn't do both, but this doesn't simulate it accurately. You would only do them one at a time. And in response to us doing that, you will see the N2 numbers coming up. So you might be wondering what N2 and N1 mean. N2 is the core engine speed. N1 is the fan speed as a percentage of nominal. Nominal is flat out to a safe extent. So 100% is, the engine is running absolutely flat out and not being overstressed. If you can push them over 100% for takeoff, or you should be able to. Whether it will allow us to do that is another matter. EGT is exhaust gas temperature. So remember, these are turbofan engines. So you've got the speed of the centre of the engine, or the core of the engine, the actual jet, the gas turbine, and then you've got the speed of the fan. So you can see the gas turbines are up to speed. The fans are not, but they've now stabilised. That's fine. As soon as we hit the engines, the fans will come up to speed. There's actually a gearbox between the jet engine and the turbofan. And then you've got fuel flow here, which is showing you how much fuel in kilograms an hour that you are burning and how much fuel you have altogether. That's the fuel on block. I'm not sure quite why they use that terminology, but anyway. So we have both engines running. Next thing we need to do is go and turn the APU off, because the engines are now generating electricity because they are running. So we get rid of the bleed and we turn APU off, and that switch goes out on its own. And that's it. Bizarrely, that is it for the Flight Sim 737, the stock one that's built in. This has all come on its own. It should not have. These should all have been switched off by default, or down to as dim as they would go, and we should have had to go through all of these knobs, switching them all on. We should also have had to go into the inertial navigation system on the init page, and there isn't even a link for it, to set it up, to give it its initial coordinates. So there's tons missing. You would also have gone in, we can see fuel predictions and things, and yeah, it's asking for some. Where you see square boxes, it's expecting you to type things in. Unfortunately, on the real aircraft, you'd have an iPad or a computer. That's what this keyboard is here for. So you could pull this out and pull up displays to figure out what your various parameters are to put into the MCDU. You see a flight plan. Again, we can't program it because they haven't let you do things like that yet. It's a bit annoying, really. It's showing you the flight plan, but you can't go and easily put legs into it or anything like that. You have to go and load it via the world menu before you come into the game, which is a bit rubbish. I wonder if they've modelled... Oh, the brightness works bizarrely. They've actually done that. I think it's just that they were rushed. Microsoft obviously pushed Asobo to get this out of the door, so they've kind of made it safe to use, but there's a lot missing. So yeah, the aircraft is ready to go. Oh, we have to, after starting the engines, we have to go and turn this back to norm. I forgot that completely. So there you go. So if we go and look outside now, you'll see the engines are whizzing round. And it's good to go. What we might want to do at that point is go into, tune into Edwards ground. Okay, where is the pushback? parking and fueling options. Ground services. Here we go. Request pushback. And I want to push back
Edwards ground,
left.
Airbus Alpha Sierra X-ray 320 requesting pushback.
So you'll see the truck now go and manoeuvre. So if we go inside while we're waiting for that. Again, the pushback, this is all a bit simplified. They should be asking us to do things like engage or disengage the parking brake. We'll see if they do. So they've hooked on. They should now ask us to remove the parking brake so they can push us. No, we're moving. So it's trying to force us along. If we remove the parking brake, they should have asked us over the radio. So we want to go left.
Edwards ground, Airbus Alpha Sierra X-ray 320 requesting pushback to steer the aircraft to the left. Airbus Alpha Sierra
There it goes, they're going left.
Your request has been transmitted to the operator.
Again, this is ridiculous. It doesn't really work like this. You would give your plan to the tug, you would talk to him and tell him your plans before you start pushing. So, request pushback to stop.
Edwards ground, Airbus
Because otherwise this
Sierra
happens.
X-ray 320 requesting the end of pushback. Airbus Alpha Sierra X-ray
Yeah, it's ridiculous. You would have the conversation with the pushback operator before they begin pushing, and they would carry out your instructions to completion. Okay, so they've now done that. So if we go and look outside again, you will see he's now driving away. So we could get on if we wanted to. Oh look, that's going to drive straight through us. What a wonderful simulation that is. So at this point, we've already got, again, at the point they released the truck at the front, the pushback truck, they should have asked us to re-engage the parking brake before they disengaged from the front wheel. And they didn't. There's a lot of things missing in this. For example, you can't... Oh, it's working now. It wasn't working earlier. How bizarre. So these are now working. If we pull the speed brakes, you have to pull it up before you move it. Is it going to let us do it? So if we go and look outside, you can see there's the flaps along the top of the wing. Those are the speed brakes. So if we wind them back in, and they've gone back down again. They're quite fast. A lot faster than the flaps. So if we go to flaps 4, we can actually watch them. If we go back in, flap 0, and they wind themselves back in again. If you've ever sat in these windows along here in a real aircraft, you'll have seen this all happening during takeoff and landing. It's in the wing changing its shape. So there you go. We could go and taxi out now and take off. I'm not going to do that in this video. This was just to show the cold and dark startup. Okay, I think that's probably enough.